Somos bombardeados com imagens como estas. As alterações climáticas estão a mudar o planeta e os governos pouco fazem para o impedir. Muito pelo contrário.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
Antigos empresários petrolíferos no gabinete de Donald Trump desvalorizam as alterações climáticas.
There is no model that has yet been developed that scientists would say is competent at predicting the future.
Mas o Procurador-Geral de Nova Iorque crê que as empresas petrolíferas têm conhecimento das alterações climáticas há décadas, sem nunca informarem o público. Estão milhares de milhões de dólares em jogo.
Every fossil fuel company has a responsibility to be honest with its investors and with the public. The First Amendment, ladies and gentlemen, does not give you the right to commit fraud.
O advogado Carol Moffett está a investigar esta fraude. Afirma que encontrou documentos que provam que as empresas petrolíferas têm financiado secretamente investigações sobre alterações climáticas nos últimos 60 anos.
So the oil industry knew from the 1940s and 50s that there was a connection between sea level rise and carbon in the atmosphere. This is one of the biggest scandals in global history.
Se as empresas petrolíferas sabiam da ameaça das alterações climáticas, por que motivo ocultaram? Estamos em Washington, a capital dos Estados Unidos, para tentarmos aceder aos ficheiros confidenciais da indústria petrolífera. Vamos encontrar-nos com quem os descobriu e os publicou. É um ativista que afirma que os diretores da petrolífera ExxonMobil sabem das alterações climáticas há 60 anos. Mas será isto possível? E por que ocultariam esta informação?
Hello.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Carol Moffett trabalha para uma ONG que luta por maior proteção ambiental. Ele mostra-nos pesquisas antigas sobre alterações climáticas. O relatório de Brannan examinou os efeitos dos gases de escape na nossa atmosfera em 1957. Foi encomendado pela ExxonMobil. Moffett trouxe-nos também o relatório de Robinson de 1968, que foi redigido pelo Instituto de Pesquisa de Stanford e financiado pela indústria petrolífera.
We have it there in black and white. Here are a few things that they said about carbon dioxide. If CO2 levels continue to rise at present rates, it is likely that noticeable increases in temperature could occur. However, there seems to be no doubt that the potential damage to our environment could be severe. Although there are other possible sources for the additional CO2 now being observed in the atmosphere, none seems to fit the presently observed situation as well as the fossil fuel emanation theory. This device was delivered to the oil industry at its very top levels, and we can prove that. We can prove that high-level executives in all of the companies saw this report.
O relatório de Robinson prova que há 50 anos a indústria petrolífera sabia que a queima de combustíveis fósseis afetava o clima global.
What did they do when they knew about climate change?
The answer is that they immediately asked Stanford Research Institute to go back and check its work. They didn't like these conclusions, so they said try again. They tried to deny, and in reporting to the government, they began cherry picking and highlighting only the passages out of this report that talked about the uncertainties, not about the realities. This is a story we'll see over and over again with the oil industry, so that the doubt becomes the message. It's a very effective form of propaganda.
Moffett pôde provar as suas alegações porque comparou a versão original com a versão reescrita do relatório de Robinson. Ele acredita que os resultados ainda não foram manchete nas notícias porque o tipo de linguagem não era claro o suficiente.
One of the reasons so much of this story was hiding in plain sight for so long is that we talk about climate change as climate change. In the 1990s, everyone talked about it as global warming. Before the 1990s, people talked about it as climate change. Before that, it was climatic change. Before that, it was the dilution of radiocarbons in the atmosphere, or the Seuss effect. And the name has changed over and over again. By the time I had learned the language well enough to understand, I had actually found this Brannan paper, the 1957 paper, maybe a year earlier. But it was only after I learned the new language that I could really understand what they were talking about and prove that what they were talking about was climate change.
Mas quando é que os barões do petróleo começaram o encobrimento? Moffat acredita que isto remonta à década de 1940, quando as empresas petrolíferas encomendaram as primeiras pesquisas ao efeito que o crescente tráfego rodoviário tinha no ambiente.
I'm thinking this is how it started, and this is why it started. In Los Angeles in the 1940s, as cars were exploding, the automobile economy was exploding, Los Angeles was plagued by smog. And when the people of Los Angeles started looking to oil and gas as the reason for smog, the industry started fighting back. And it was that fighting back that led in December 1946 to the creation of the Smoke and Fumes Committee and to the oil industry's grand strategy to combine science with public relations to constantly delay action on a range of air pollution measures that began with smog but soon expanded to include sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide, the main driver of climate change.
O principal objetivo do comitê era evitar possíveis restrições legais, tal como o seu presidente, Vance Jenkins, esclareceu em 1954. O pior que pode acontecer em muitos casos é a aprovação apressada de uma lei ou leis para o controle de uma determinada situação de poluição atmosférica. As empresas petrolíferas conceberam e financiaram uma rede de investigação que incluía o Instituto de Pesquisa de Stanford. Foram redigidos relatórios desfavoráveis. Porém, 40 anos depois, os diretores da ExxonMobil ainda negam a existência destas pesquisas.
Proponents of the global warming theory say that higher levels of greenhouse gases are causing world temperatures to rise and that burning fossil fuels is the reason. But scientific evidence remains inconclusive as to whether human activities affect the global climate.
A indústria petrolífera usou o seu conhecimento para semear a dúvida e impedir a legislação contra o uso de combustíveis fósseis. Mas terá sido esta a única razão para fazerem pesquisas secretas sobre o clima? Vamos agora a caminho da Pensilvânia para nos encontrarmos com um ex-funcionário da ExxonMobil. Durante séculos foram construídos navios nas margens do rio Delaware. Um deles foi uma encomenda especial da ExxonMobil. Em 1969, a empresa transformou um petroleiro com 300 metros de comprimento num navio quebra-gelo para uma expedição muito especial ao Ártico.
Much of what Exxon did with the voyage, it held in secrecy. This is a company that was very good at controlling what went onto paper. They had every incentive to try and find a route through the sea ice to get that oil to market. Were they also looking at the long-term prospects of a melting Arctic?
A razão oficial da viagem foi descobrir se um navio daquela dimensão poderia viajar até aos campos petrolíferos do Alasca. Mas para Carol Moffat, foi antes um teste para saber se novas e mais rápidas rotas marítimas podiam abrir-se quando o gelo do Ártico derretesse devido às alterações climáticas.
The voyage itself was really remarkable. They brought the ship for retrofitting here to Chester, Pennsylvania.
Just here, so it crossed that bridge.
Well, 2 times, because first they cut the ship into 4 pieces and sent it to shipyards across the country so they could rebuild it and retrofit it. And they brought it back to the Sun shipyards and put it back together and then sailed it out under this bridge.
Saberiam os diretores da ExxonMobil nessa altura que as alterações climáticas fariam a camada de gelo derreter? Um dos investigadores no SS Manhattan era Edwin Clark. Queremos que ele nos diga por que razão o superpetroleiro viajou até ao Alasca. Pela primeira vez, Edwin Clark fala sobre o seu trabalho e as intenções da ExxonMobil.
Hello, gentlemen. I'm
Hi.
Ed Clark.
It's nice to meet you, Adam. Carol.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Johan. Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Edwin Clark junta-se a nós numa viagem até ao estaleiro onde o SS Manhattan foi adaptado em 1969. Estaleiro esse que encerrou portas 20 anos mais tarde.
Well, I can remember the Manhattan sitting between two gates of this nature and welders working on each side.
And what was your first impression when you saw it?
It's big, 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 big. And I was very proud to be selected as an ice scientist on it.
A viagem foi um sucesso. O SS Manhattan atravessou a passagem do Noroeste, provando que o petróleo podia de facto ser transportado através do Ártico.
For me, one of the really interesting questions is how much of the possibility of climate change was in the atmosphere, in the lead up to the Manhattan expedition.
I didn't really hear about it until in '69 I went on to work on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. And it was a year or two after that we started putting a provision in there for an increase in soil temperatures due to global warming.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
What, 2 or 3 years after that?
That's really incredible to hear.
Well, back in '69, there were proponents and doubters that it really existed.
Yeah.
And the scientific community was divided on that subject.
But you took into account the risk and started planning for it.
Well, even yes, we did.
Não podemos provar que o SS Manhattan foi enviado para o Ártico por causa das alterações climáticas, mas as declarações de Edwin Clark destacam um facto interessante. As alterações climáticas eram um problema para a ExxonMobil nessa altura. O próprio Clark já sabia das alterações climáticas há 47 anos. Ele e outros engenheiros usaram os seus conhecimentos já em 1970 na concepção e construção do oleoduto Trans-Alaska. Devido ao risco de degelo do permafrost, conceberam melhores âncoras terrestres para as torres do oleoduto. Alguns colegas de Clark também estiveram envolvidos na construção de plataformas petrolíferas no Ártico. Será que também eles aplicaram os conhecimentos secretos sobre as alterações climáticas? Na procura de mais provas, encontramos um engenheiro que concebeu plataformas petrolíferas para a Shell na década de 1970 e que não quer revelar a sua identidade.
Hello Robert. Do you hear me? That's a pleasure and thank you for your time.
No problem. How can I help you?
When did it all start?
Well, Shell sent me to Alaska in '63 to build oil platforms.
Did you ever thought about climate change? Perhaps that there has been a climate change?
Climate change was not really being questioned. It was being accepted as a fact. The question was how quickly it was going to happen because it had very important influences on the design of the oil rigs. And at that point, we asked ourselves, would the ice be stronger or weaker in the future?
Why did you change plannings of these constructions?
The ice thickness was decreasing. So the decision was made to base the design on the 1960s conditions and not on conditions in the future, as they would be less severe.
So the first platform you designed is still operating?
It is still operating in Cook Inlet.
Incredible.
It is called Platform A.
Queremos verificar estas alegações e ver as plataformas pessoalmente. De Washington até Anchorage, a maior cidade do Alasca, é um voo de 9 horas. A partir daí temos mais 4 horas de carro através da península de Kenai. A produção de petróleo teve início aqui, em 1958. Os nossos telefonemas para os operários da plataforma não foram atendidos. Portanto, dirigimos-nos à plataforma petrolífera num barco de pesca. O ativista ambiental Bob Shevelson junta-se a nós. Bob luta há anos contra a poluição causada por estas plataformas.
So on a clear day here, you would see 13,000 foot, couple large volcanoes right here.
Thank you very much for mentioning that.
Should have been here yesterday. Alaska's on the front lines of rapid climate change. We're seeing impacts here that they're not seen anywhere else in the United States. If you look in the Arctic area, our sea ice is diminishing. In a decade or so, there may be no more sea ice in the Arctic. That's an incredible impact. The permafrost that lies under the ground is melting, so infrastructure, roads and houses are falling in. So there's real quantifiable impacts from climate change that we're seeing now. It's not something that we're talking theoretically about in the future.
Chegamos ao nosso destino. A plataforma A, concebida para a Shell. Os engenheiros que a construíram na década de 1960 já sabiam que a camada de gelo seria mais fina no futuro e que a sua concepção poderia ser mais leve. Robert Mao é pescador. A sua zona de pesca situa-se precisamente na área onde o petróleo é produzido. A sua sobrinha está a ajudá-lo a preparar as redes.
What's that spill down there?
It's hard to tell. They're not drilling right now, but there's always some pollution coming from the platform.
Yeah, and they're allowed to do that.
They're allowed to do that under a loophole in our federal law, the Clean Water Act. It's the only area in the country where that loophole exists.
That makes you angry, as I see.
Oh, it doesn't make any sense, and it's all just about profit. You know, these are our public waterways. In the United States, every American, every Alaskan collectively owns these resources. So these companies are taking something from me and my children when they dump into this water body.
Atualmente existem 16 plataformas de perfuração na enseada de Cook.
This past winter, Platform A had a natural gas line leak right in here. And it went on for several months.
No.
Because the company chose not to shut down the leak because they wanted to continue making profits.
They didn't care about the leak.
No.
And it was bubbling gas coming out.
Yeah. It was in the newspapers. It was everywhere.
A fuga acabou por ser reparada ao fim de 2 meses. Os pescadores locais e a indústria petrolífera estão muitas vezes em conflito. As plataformas estão velhas. Os derramamentos de petróleo ou gás são frequentes. Por vezes, as âncoras dos barcos de pesca perfuram os oleodutos que ligam as plataformas petrolíferas. Plataformas concebidas na década de 1960, com as alterações climáticas em vista.
This Platform A, I spoke to the engineer who built that, and he said that they used findings on climate change in the early 60s to reconstruct that oil rig. They knew that there would be less ice in the future, so does this surprise you?
No, not at all. I think they've known about it for many, many decades, and they've just chosen to suppress that information. And they realized that all they had to do is say that there's some doubt about this, and there's a question about this, and they pay people to raise those questions.
Would you say oil companies are betraying the public?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think they're acting in a private interest when they should be acting in the public interest. And I think it's a crime. I think it's a theft, not only for current generations, but future generations. We're robbing from our children, and that's wrong. And we're doing it in the name of money.
Segundo o nosso informador, na concepção da plataforma petrolífera foi usado um estudo de 1957 feito à massa de gelo. Terá a Shell tido conhecimento das alterações climáticas através deste e de outros estudos realizados na década de 1960? A Shell não responde às nossas indagações. Mas Carol Moffett tem uma teoria.
Well, what do you think about that? That's not a coincidence, no?
I think it's a really interesting connection. We know that Hal Payton was doing research on the sea ice and how it affected marine structures in the 1960s. I think there is more to explore there.
As descobertas da Carol Moffett e as nossas entrevistas aos engenheiros que conceberam estas plataformas parecem sugerir que as empresas petrolíferas estavam a adaptar-se às alterações climáticas enquanto negavam publicamente a sua existência. Esta plataforma petrolífera no Alasca foi construída para mantos de gelo mais finos. O oleoduto Trans-Alaska foi concebido para o degelo de permafrost. Plataformas petrolíferas no Golfo do México foram reforçadas para suportar tempestades mais fortes. Durante a década de 1990, instalações petrolíferas no leste do Canadá foram concebidas com uma base mais elevada, antevendo a subida do nível do mar. Em 1989, a plataforma da Noruega foi igualmente construída 2 metros acima do normal. E um gasoduto entre a Alemanha e a Noruega foi fortalecido. Estas medidas custam milhares de milhões e são uma indicação de que as empresas petrolíferas já se preparavam para as alterações climáticas, numa altura em que pesquisas feitas com financiamento público estavam apenas a começar a compreender as causas e os efeitos. Mas haveria mesmo um programa secreto há décadas financiado pela indústria petrolífera? A nossa investigação leva-nos até Nova Jersey. Esperamos obter respostas de um geoquímico que trabalhava para a Exxon. Encontramos-nos com ele em sua casa.
Hello. Good to see you.
Edward Garvey.
Yes, that's me.
Yeah.
Edward Garvey trabalhou para a ExxonMobil de 1978 a 1983.
So this is your. There you have your own old Exxon belongings.
Right. This is
Should
it.
you
I
show
got
me?
my helmet, which still fits, and the coveralls.
Okay. Work safely, ESSO prevent accidents. Oh yeah. Okay.
I don't fit in them anymore.
So you did. You measured CO2 emissions with that.
Right. When I was wearing this, we were installing the equipment in the oil tanker. We made measurements of seawater, we made measurements of the air, and we did it almost continuously as the ship ran from the Gulf of Mexico to the Persian Gulf via the Horn of Africa.
As empresas petrolíferas já sabiam que o clima estava a mudar. Agora queriam compreender melhor os mecanismos. A pesquisa demorou 4 anos e custou cerca de 4 milhões de dólares. Foi tão importante que a ExxonMobil fez um filme sobre o tema para os seus acionistas. O personagem principal era Edward Garvey.
All right, come on. Show you
Yes.
some tomatoes. It's just a really good climate to produce tomatoes here.
Can you pick one?
Yes.
Hoje, Garvey investiga a descontaminação de solos e cultiva tomates nos tempos livres. Recorda-se nitidamente do trabalho pioneiro que realizou há 40 anos.
Well, we found, we observed a number of things. We observed the upwelling and the release of CO2 from the central portions of the oceans around the equatorial zones. The data, as far as it went, was again interpreted by the scientists at Columbia maybe 3 or 4 years later.
But what has been your findings until then?
Just a whole map of the ocean's CO2 levels. So using the Exxon data along with other studies, my thesis advisor, Tara Takahashi and Wally Broker, used that information and created a whole map of CO2 levels in the ocean. It was an important step in understanding the role of the ocean in governing atmospheric CO2. It was so new and challenging that it really whet my appetite for the kind of work. And the scientists I worked with, they were all excited as well. It was just a tremendous amount of enthusiasm in-house, within the scientists and stuff. And you know, it went all the way up. We presented to the corporate board, not me, but my boss presented to the corporate board at Exxon.
Why did Exxon funded programs to know the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere? Do you know?
Exxon funded those studies because they wanted to be a player at the table.
They saw that this was going to be a problem. Exxon saw that this was going to be an issue for the world.
A administração cortou o financiamento do projeto. A razão apresentada foi falta de capital. Em simultâneo, segundo Carol Moffett, regressaram às antigas táticas de lançar dúvida acerca das alterações climáticas provocadas por mão humana.
The oil industry was an early investor in the idea that climate change is actually caused by changes in the sun. That variation in the sun is a major driver of climate variation. And that's an argument that we see climate denialists using to this day. And so in that way, the oil industry's early investments really paid off over the long term.
A estratégia também compensou.
We still have in government the same kind of denials that we had at Exxon a decade ago. And they could have been leaders, but instead they didn't. They chose not to. And they really were at a position in the 70s and the early 80s where they could have been in a position of leadership, where they would have, the science that they were doing would have been taken seriously and they would have been listened to. Exxon Solar was a big solar panel engineering development entity. They had Exxon Nuclear, they had, I don't remember what else they had. I think they had wind as well. But they had a lot of different, they had Exxon Nuclear, had Exxon Coal. They were really diversifying as an energy company. And when they reversed that in the 80s. And they shrank, if you would, in terms of their global impact, in terms of what they could do, and became much more an oil company again. They got back to their basics. But I think that they squandered an opportunity. And it was just, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. I mean, that's, you know, we've known about this problem for a long time. And it's just, how can I say, really frustrating.
Pedimos à ExxonMobil que comentasse o relatório de Robinson e os estudos de Harold Garvey e perguntámos se a empresa alterou ou não os projetos das plataformas de modo a adaptarem-se às alterações climáticas, mas não obtivemos resposta. Conduzir a sua própria investigação e questionar publicamente os resultados tem sido uma estratégia bem-sucedida das empresas petrolíferas. Viemos à cidade de Nova Iorque para nos encontrarmos com um assessor de comunicação de empresas energéticas americanas e europeias. Sebastian Schwark recebe-nos no 16º piso de um edifício na Baixa de Manhattan.
Es ist immer einfacher, Zweifel zu säen, als jetzt Menschen wirklich von der Wahrheit zu überzeugen. Die PR-Experten nennen das dann Narrative, also aus diesen Perspektiven entstehen dann unterschiedliche Narrative, die alle ihren eigenen Wahrheitsanspruch haben. Selbst ExxonMobil würde jetzt nicht sagen, dass das Klimawandel kein Problem ist. Ja? Also die wissen schon sehr genau, was passiert.
As grandes empresas são agora mais cuidadosamente vigiadas do que há 50 anos. Têm de explicar exatamente onde gastam o seu capital. Atualmente deixam que outros façam o seu trabalho sujo.
Deshalb gibt es in meinen Augen halt Netzwerke, die halt eher sozusagen in so einer Art Halböffentlichkeit arbeiten, ja, und so kann halt verschleiert werden, wer eigentlich diese Sachen finanziert, ohne dass halt gegen bestimmte Gesetze verstoßen wird. Aber was sie brauchen, ist im Prinzip, sie brauchen ein paar Studien, also sie brauchen irgendeine wissenschaftliche oder semi-wissenschaftliche Autorität. Da gibt es eine Reihe von Forschungsinstituten, die im Prinzip auf Auftrag Ergebnisse liefern, gerade in der Energiewirtschaft. Und das heißt, das müssten sie finanzieren. Das kostet dann, je nach Umfang, kann das halt irgendwie 50.000 € oder 100.000 oder auch mehr sein. Wenn sie natürlich richtig viel Geld haben, dann schaffen sie ihr eigenes Forschungsinstitut. Das wird in den USA halt gemacht. Dann wird halt nur in eine Richtung entsprechend wissenschaftlich oder eigentlich semi-wissenschaftlich oder pseudowissenschaftlich vielleicht auch dann geforscht.
And we've seen the oil industry, particularly, use that strategy over and over again. They were the early masters of it, beginning with lead and then moving into air pollutants like smog and carbon dioxide. They really pioneered many of the strategies that we've seen other industries use for years, strategies that focus on uncertainty, on doubt, on denial, and in the end, on the economics, and an argument that it's too late to address the problem, and so now we need to adapt to it.
Atualmente, as alterações climáticas não estão na agenda política americana. Muitos dos membros do gabinete de Trump são ex-gestores da indústria petrolífera e céticos das alterações climáticas. O procurador-geral de Trump, Jeff Sessions, pôs fim a uma investigação à ExxonMobil. O secretário de Energia, Rick Perry, e o responsável da Agência de Proteção Ambiental, Scott Pruitt, não acreditam que as alterações climáticas existam.
Science tells us that the climate is changing, and then human activity in some manner impacts that change. The ability to measure with precision the degree and extent of that impact and what to do about it are subject to continuing debate and dialogue.
O secretário de Estado, Rex Tillerson, ex-diretor executivo da ExxonMobil, acredita que as alterações climáticas ainda são um tema de discussão.
There is no model that has yet been developed that scientists would say is competent at predicting the future.
E o presidente Trump sonha com carvão limpo.
Today, I'm taking bold action to follow through on that promise. My administration is putting an end to the war on coal. Going to have clean coal, really clean coal.
Em junho de 2017, Trump anuncia a sua retirada do Acordo do Clima.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
Os céticos das alterações climáticas marcam agora o rumo em Washington. No dia a seguir à eleição de Trump, a ExxonMobil abriu um processo judicial contra Carol Moffett. O objetivo é obrigá-lo a revelar os seus contactos. Stephen Feit, membro do seu staff, está preocupado com as futuras investigações.
What was it like when you got that subpoena the day after the election?
Well, the remarkable thing is it was surprising, but not really surprising. I mean, we knew when we started this work that they would come after us, and they would come after us hard.
I remember reading the email that you sent alerting us to the subpoena and thinking, oh, there's nothing I can do, and just wondering what can we do, what happens now?
The real irony of waking up on the morning after Donald Trump was elected and having a subpoena from Exxon that day, it was striking. And it really pointed to the whole new world, the dark world that we've entered in this work. I'm concerned that the instruments of power, the instruments of government, were turned into a circus in defense of a single large corporation. I'm concerned that the person who is now our Attorney General tried to stop a federal investigation into Exxon. I'm concerned that the person who's now the head of our Environmental Protection Agency tried to stop the state investigations into Exxon. We now have not only a Republican Congress, not only a Republican House aligned against us, we have a Republican White House led by a president who is an avowed climate denialist. So what's that like? It suggests we've got a long way to go.
Cerca de um terço dos membros do Congresso dos Estados Unidos são céticos das alterações climáticas.
They are laughable. It is laughable to have a member of Congress walk in to the floor of Congress on a snowy day and hold up a snowball and say, because it snowed today, climate change doesn't exist. That is ridiculous. It is laughable and it is sad.
Décadas de informação errónea e encoberta, em conjunto com lobbies organizados, deram às empresas petrolíferas a capacidade de impedir qualquer legislação eficaz contra as alterações climáticas.
What makes this the biggest scandal that I can imagine is it didn't happen only in the U.S. The reason that Smoke and Fumes points to a scandal of massive scale is because literally everyone on the planet is affected by it, and everyone in future generations for 100 years to come and potentially more is affected by it. The scale of it in economic costs, in cost to biodiversity, in cost to human lives and human rights is truly incalculable.
Vamos viajar até a Europa porque também aqui encontramos pessoas que duvidam da mão humana como causa das alterações climáticas. Na Alemanha, um país na vanguarda da revolução da energia verde, seria de pensar que as ideias dos céticos seriam motivo de escárnio. Mas será assim? Stefan Ramstad estuda as alterações climáticas há 25 anos. Ele e os seus colegas são cada vez mais perseguidos pelas suas descobertas.
Was natürlich für uns als Wissenschaftler schon störend ist, dass man massive Anfeindungen, zunehmend Hassmails bis hin zu Todesdrohungen auch gegen meine Familie bekommt. Der Kollege Mike Mann in den USA, der kennt das schon länger, der hat auch schon mal ein weißes Pulver zugeschickt bekommen und das ganze Unigebäude wurde geräumt. Also das ist schon sehr lästig.
Para Stefan e o ambientalista Egbert Bialk, promover a energia eólica é um passo importante na luta contra as alterações climáticas. Mas nem todos têm a mesma opinião.
Wenn man einen Anteil an einer Energiegenossenschaft hat, ist man plötzlich ein Goldgräber, will nur Geld verdienen und dann ist man plötzlich, weil man für eine gute Sache kämpft, also sprich für die Energiewende, und für den Klimaschutz steht man am Pranger.
Man kann beobachten, dass die meisten der Behauptungen, die hier auch in Deutschland von Klimawandelleugnern vertreten werden, ursprünglich aus den USA gekommen sind. Trotzdem taucht seit 20 Jahren immer wieder diese falsche Behauptung auf. Und in den letzten Jahren war in Deutschland insbesondere Herr Fahrenhold auf dem Gebiet aktiv mit seinem Buch Die kalte Sonne. Schon der Titel ist ja sehr schön, weil er eben zeigt, dass die Sonnenleuchtkraft abgenommen hat. Und konsequenterweise hat Fahrenhold eben auch eine Abkühlung vorhergesagt. Eine spektakulär falsche Voraussage, weil inzwischen haben wir die wärmsten Jahre seit Beginn der Aufzeichnungen erlebt, 2014, 2015 und 2016. 3 rekordwarme Jahre in Folge.
Fritz Fahrenhold, antigo gestor da área energética, é um dos céticos das alterações climáticas mais conhecidos na Alemanha.
Wir kommen zum Ergebnis, dass Kohlendioxid allenfalls die Hälfte der Erwärmung ausmacht, die der Weltklimarat behauptet. Die Aktivität der Sonne und die ozeanischen Strömungen haben den Rest besorgt.
Fritz exige que se adie a transição para as energias renováveis.
Wir gewinnen Zeit, die Energieversorgung auf vernünftige Weise umzustellen. Es wird nicht zur Klimakatastrophe kommen.
Fahrenhold gera agora a Fundação Alemã para a Vida Selvagem. Continua a ser contra a revolução energética, mas agora em nome do bem-estar animal. Até mesmo na jovem e moderna cidade de Berlim, as empresas esforçam-se para lançar dúvidas sobre as alterações climáticas. As antigas táticas de encobrimento usadas pela primeira vez em Los Angeles há 70 anos também parecem resultar aqui. Vamos encontrar-nos com Claudia Kempfert, do Instituto Económico Alemão. Ela acredita que as realidades políticas estão a mudar.
Man beobachtet, dass es ungewöhnliche Allianzen gibt. Also Naturschützer, die sich da auch als Naturschützer zeigen, sind plötzlich verbunden mit Politikern, die eben auch gegen die Energiewende argumentieren, oder Klimawandelskeptiker, die auch entsprechend dort mit dabei sind. Und alle haben ein Ziel, die Energiewende schlecht zu reden. Ja, öffentlich wird behauptet, man sei für die Energiewende, aber im Hintergrund laufen eben ganz andere Dinge ab.
Descobrimos que há empresas europeias a tentar influenciar a política dos Estados Unidos. Durante os últimos 6 anos, funcionários da Bayer doaram cerca de $18.000 a Michael Conaway, um republicano que não acredita em alterações climáticas.
We changed the phraseology because it's the climate's not warming.
E deram $34.000 a Fred Upton, que duvida que algo possa ser feito em relação às alterações climáticas.
There was no real science to verify that it would reduce the temperature rise that some predicted.
No total, os funcionários da empresa alemã Bayer doaram $544.000 aos céticos das alterações climáticas através dos chamados Comitês de Ação Política. Funcionários da empresa química BASF doaram $551.000. Isto prefaz aproximadamente 30% de todos os donativos de ambas as empresas a políticos americanos ao longo dos últimos 6 anos. As duas empresas alegam estar empenhadas na proteção do clima. Mas então por que motivo apoiam céticos das alterações climáticas e por que estão a envolver-se sequer na política americana?
Deutsche Unternehmen können durchaus auch vom Politikwechsel in den USA profitieren, was daran liegt, dass die Diskussionen, die dort angefangen werden, eben gegen Klimaschutz, den Klimawandel zu leugnen und auch die Emissionen nicht zu senken, sondern das alles auf die lange Bank zu schieben, den Unternehmen hilft. Weil je länger es dauert, bis der Klimaschutz auch tatsächlich in aktive Politik umgesetzt wird, desto mehr Zeit für die konventionellen Geschäftsmodelle und davon profitieren die Unternehmen.
No entanto, a Bayer diz-nos que os donativos são feitos por outras razões, nomeadamente as políticas de saúde e agricultura. O gabinete da imprensa escreve o seguinte: é inevitável que os candidatos selecionados incluam os que não partilham da nossa opinião sobre outras questões, tais como a proteção do clima. A BASF alega não ser o responsável. É uma decisão que eles apoiam dos funcionários individuais. O único apoio prestado pela empresa é de natureza logística, como por exemplo e-mail, telefone, escritórios, etc. Então, o que pode ser feito contra este sistema de encobrimentos, estudos unilaterais e lobbies políticos? Como podem as corporações ser responsabilizadas? Advogados do mundo inteiro estão a trabalhar numa solução. Vão tentar processar as empresas energéticas e fazê-las pagar pelos danos causados pelas suas emissões. Rhoda Verheyen é uma dessas advogadas. Está neste momento a processar a empresa alemã RWE, a maior emissora de CO2 da Europa.
Das sind die Schwaden aus den Kühltürmen. Das ist letztlich Wasserdampf, die eigentliche Kesselanlage emittiert über den Schornstein und die Schornsteine, die hohen, das sind die, wo tatsächlich Emissionen in der Weise rauskommen. Ja, also mein Mandant ist ein peruanischer Bergführer, Kleinbauer und Hauseigentümer. Sein Haus steht in Huaraz, das ist eine Stadt am Fuße der Anden in Peru. Und diese Stadt ist überthront von Gletschern und unter anderem von einer Lagune. Diese Lagune ist durch den Gletscherschwund erheblich angewachsen und die Flutgefahr ist erheblich gestiegen. Praktisch eine Frage des Wann, nicht eine Frage des Ob.
Luciano Liua tem de construir uma represa para proteger a sua casa. Por esse motivo está a processar o grupo RWE pedindo uma indenização de 20.000 euros.
Wieso ist denn jetzt RWE verantwortlich mit dem Braunkohlekraftwerk für ein Schmelzen von einem Gletscher in Peru?
Der Gletscher in Peru schmilzt natürlich nicht nur wegen diesem Kraftwerk oder diesem oder anderen hier in Deutschland, aber auch wegen diesem Kraftwerk. Es geht um die Teilverursachung durch alle Emissionen aller Kraftwerke der RWE AG, die sich niederschlagen in der lokalen Erwärmung und deswegen auch dem Gletscherschwund in den Anden.
O caso contra a RWE ainda está pendente e a investigação está em curso. Se Verheyen e Liuya ganharem, entrarão para a história da advocacia. Os advogados da RWE preparam a sua defesa temendo uma possível proliferação de litígios. O processo judicial de Verheyen será absurdo ou consistente?
Können Sie da mal ein paar Reaktionen beschreiben?
Ja, natürlich wurde ich als verrückt, als unjuristisch, als völlig unbegründet wurde diese Klage bezeichnet. Natürlich. Es ist auch keine Klage, die man sozusagen jeden Tag vor deutschen Gerichten sieht. Ich glaube nicht, dass mein Fall der letzte bleibt. Selbst wenn ich ihn verliere, wird es sicherlich nicht der letzte bleiben, weil, ich sehe es ja, es kommen immer mehr Mandanten, die sich mit dieser Frage auseinandersetzen. Seien es Deichverbände, seien es einzelne Inseln, Bürgermeister von besonders betroffenen Küstengemeinden, ausländische Mandanten, die mich fragen, kann ich einen solchen Fall in den Himalaya transponieren? Das wird nicht der letzte bleiben. Warum? Weil die Leute sehen, was für Schäden kommen.
O caso pode parecer absurdo, Um agricultor peruano a instaurar um processo a um gigante energético alemão por danos devido às alterações climáticas. Porém, também nos Estados Unidos, os procuradores gerais estão a processar empresas energéticas. O julgamento mais importante tem lugar em Nova Iorque. Aqui não falamos de 20 mil dólares, mas sim de milhares de milhões de dólares. As descobertas feitas por investigadores como Carol Buffett ajudaram os advogados a construir o seu caso. Eric Schneiderman, o procurador-geral de Nova Iorque, encontra-se atualmente a investigar a ExxonMobil e o antigo diretor executivo Rex Tillerson, ex-secretário de Estado de Trump.
They have told the public for years that there were no competent models. That was the specific term used by an Exxon executive not so long ago. No competent models to project climate patterns. And we know that they paid millions of dollars to support organizations that put out propaganda denying that we can predict or measure the effects of fossil fuel on our climate, or even denying that climate change was happening. The First Amendment, ladies and gentlemen, does not give you the right to commit fraud.
Peter Lehner trabalhava para a equipa de Schneiderman. Estava encarregue do Departamento do Ambiente da Procuradoria-Geral.
What is the Schneiderman investigation about?
Schneiderman is investigating whether Exxon knew about climate change and knew the harms that it would cause to the company, Exxon, and failed to disclose those to the shareholders.
But what is the legal basis? I mean, it's about climate change, but the legal basis is totally different, no?
Well, the legal basis is actually very simple. It is shareholder fraud. If a company knows that climate change is going to affect the value of a company, in these cases oil companies or coal companies, and they're not disclosing what they know to the shareholders, that can be fraud. And that's really the question here. To what extent is Exxon saying one thing and doing something else?
Ainda não é certo se o caso de Nova Iorque contra a ExxonMobil alguma vez chegará a tribunal. Carol Buffett acaba de chegar à cidade. O advogado, entre outras pessoas, exerce pressão para que se formalize uma acusação. Outra apoiante do caso é Lindsay Maiman, a porta-voz do grupo A Exxon Sabia. Recentemente organizaram uma manifestação contra a ExxonMobil.
You got 300,000 people into the streets of DC for the climate march this spring, and Exxon knew was a big part of that. How did it feel?
That was absolutely exhilarating. The campaign is strong. I think when people find out all that Exxon knew, I know I personally was completely infuriated. I was born in 1992, the same year that world leaders gathered in Rio for the first climate talks to really tackle this issue as a global community. And so the reason that we have been faced with this phony debate about climate change is because of the misinformation that Exxon spread. And so I was born from a planet different from that of my parents because of this lie. There is already a public distrust of the fossil fuel industry. We've seen an erosion of that trust, and when people find out really all that Exxon knew, there's a sense of infuriation, of rightful infuriation, and then a sense of what can I do about it.
That was the goal. That's, our goal in doing this research was for other people to take the research and do more with it. Because information, once it comes to light, breeds more information. And the more we know, the more power we have to fight back. I think what we're starting to see is that people everywhere are waking up not only to the fact that climate change is real, but now we can identify the companies and the corporate actors that are responsible, and they're starting to hold them accountable. Here in the US, in Europe, in Asia, in the Philippines, globally. And it's a really exciting time to be doing this work because they're really only at the very beginning of it. I don't care if Exxon falls. What I care about is fossil fuels. And if Exxon sticks to fossil fuels and doesn't look to the future and look to a safer planet, Exxon will fail, and I will applaud. If Exxon adapts, if Exxon says we're ready to be part of real solutions and we're ready to own what we did in the past and make up for what we did in the past, then I will cheer Exxon. Do I expect that? Not on past history.
As empresas petrolíferas têm de justificar os seus atos. Contudo, as descobertas feitas por ativistas como Carol Moffett não lhes facilitam a tarefa. Peter Lehner conta-nos que 3 presidentes de Câmara de cidades costeiras na Califórnia apresentaram um processo-crime pedindo uma indenização à ExxonMobil, à Shell e a outras empresas petrolíferas para ajudar a financiar medidas de proteção. Será esta uma possível estratégia para cidades como Nova York?
So you can see the water is close and it's all around. New York City has many miles of shorefront, and as sea level rise, whether generally or in a storm, all of these areas either already have been flooded or could be flooded. And imagine trying to protect New York from these floods. It would cost billions of dollars. Maybe they would put in a seawall there or something, but it would cost billions and billions of dollars just to try to protect New York City from these new floods.
But who will pay for that?
Ultimately, it's going to be the New York City taxpayer. These cities are beginning to realize they're going to have to incur billions of dollars to protect against the damages from sea level rise. That is not just nature, that is climate change caused largely by the fossil fuel companies.
So you think they should pay it?
I think the cities that will be bringing these cases have a pretty good basis for doing that, yeah.
Processos judiciais como o de Nova York são apenas o início. A responsabilidade das empresas petrolíferas para as alterações climáticas está sob um forte escrutínio. Há mais casos a serem preparados. Porém, até agora, nenhuma das empresas foi considerada culpada.
To the center of the city where our roads meet, waiting for you. To the depths of the ocean where our hope sinks,